Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. I was really excited when I saw this book. I love tort law. It's great to teach, it's great to practice in, and to find tort law and human rights linked in the new second edition by Professor Jane Wright was something I was really looking forward to reading, which I did, and I've written this review with Elizabeth. The book's available as a book, a PDF and an e-book, and it comes to us from Tort Publishing, which of course is also part of Bloomsbury. Now, I've given the title for our book review the following. Excuse me. The scope and remedial framework of tort law explained as a new human rights landscape emerges in 2017. Now, I'm recording this at a time when we have a general election on. I've no idea what's going to happen, but it looks to me, notwithstanding anything else, that the Human Rights Act in its current form will be with us for some considerable time. There's been a lot of posturing about changes, but at this stage it does not look as though it is the main item on the political agenda, because Brexit is. So I think if we get that straight at the beginning, excuse me, we can see that there, whilst the author has made a number of comments, which I'll refer to in a minute. The book was published in 2016, and I'm recording this in 2017, but we are looking at the moment of what we've currently got by way of human rights as it affects the law of tort, but whether we are going to have any major changes in the near future, I think it probably will be left to another day, and I'll put it as simply as that. Now, this is the book. It's Heart Studies in Private Law, and it's called Tort Law and Human Rights, by second edition by Jane Wright, and it's part of the Bloomsbury group now. There's the spine, and then at the back you can see other books in the series. Now, it's a hardback, purple cover. I think it's purple cover. Doesn't say very much about Jane at all, just professor of law at the University of Essex, and that's all we get. And at the front on the dust sheet we get a little bit of information, which I borrowed partly a few quotes from for the actual book review. Now, what we do have is Tort Law and Human Rights. We've got a little statement here. It's volume 23 in the series of Heart Studies in Private Law. Then you've got the cover there. Then you've got all the basic information, including information concerning the e-publication as well. Then you've got the preface to the second edition, which is well worth reading, because you can see why there are changes. And even this was written in June 2016, and nearly a year later I've written a review. So things have moved on a bit since June, and obviously what we were talking about then was the issue of the new Conservative government under the leadership then of Theresa May, and of course the British Bill of Rights itself, which was talked about and still is being talked about. Then you've got the contents section, which is quite detailed. They have a lot of public authority information there. Table of cases, I'll come on to that again in a minute. And then after the table of cases, a little bit of legislation, of course. Wouldn't be right otherwise. And that's done by country. So you've got individual countries with legislation. The United Kingdom, of course, coming up in the rear because of it being the United Kingdom, capital U. Now, chapter 1, there we go, Tort Law and Human Rights, Introduction. You've got a subheading and you've got some footnoting. And then that's really the way the book runs all the way through. As I said, at the back there is a short index. The index is by page numbering, it's not by referencing, because there isn't any in that sense. It's a short index, and again, concluding remarks right at the end, which are worth reading, although one of the problems with this particular subject is that it is moving forward quite quickly. There's been an awful lot of mouthing off in the media about human rights, but we have the Human Rights Act in its current form on the books. There will be some changes, I'm sure, in due course, but not yet. And meanwhile, we have this book. So what do we think of it? Well, Elizabeth and I talked about this book because the first edition came out in 2001, so it's a long time ago, basically just after the implementation of the 1998 Act. And so things have moved forward, and it's amazing how quickly legal matters can change. And so it's the case with this excellent new edition from Professor Jane Wright, her book on tort and human rights. And in her preface, Jane talks of Mrs. May as the new Prime Minister, possible Bill of Rights, but such conversations basically have been thrown into the air by the effect of Brexit and what's happening at the moment, and the calling of a general election for June 2017. And what the new government will do once the new parliament is opened, we do not know at this stage. So all we can do is present this as a wait and see point. But we do have a splendid statement here, of course, for the time being, of where we are in mid 2016 on tortious liability and human rights. And of course, tort remains such a fascinating part of the common law, a cornerstone, great to teach and even more fascinating to practice in, although you can go up and down a bit depending on which areas you practice in within tort law. And of course, Wright's book makes our task, I think, all much easier. And Hart Publishing and Bloomsbury have completely revised and expanded the second edition for 2016. They expanded the first edition with the two principal aims being set out as the mission statement for readers. That is the statement in the book. It says, to elucidate the role that domestic tort principles play in securing to citizens the human rights standards laid down in the European Convention on Human Rights, including the new remedy under the Human Rights Act 1998, and to evaluate tort principles for compliance with those standards. And that's where we are at the moment, although there have been a lot of criticisms. And Jane Wright wrote the first edition when the Human Rights Act had just come into force. It was a new piece of legislation, all new for all of us as practitioners. Many questions were being raised as to its potential impact on tort law, and the most human, which is of course the most human of the substantive law areas as far as some of us are concerned. And some answers to many questions raised at the turn of the century continue to come forward today at a time of threatened change. So we welcome the new second edition, with probably more to follow. We'll have to see, obviously, what happens. And the author's main point when the 1998 Act arrived was what impact the HRA would have on the development of common law tort principles. Two questions continue to be posed. First, to what extent would the Human Rights Act impact on relations between non-state actors as a result of the designation of the court as a public authority under Section 6 of the Human Rights Act? That's the so-called horizontal effect. Think European law again, the horizontal effect question. And second, what impact would the Human Rights Act have on the development of common law principles in cases brought against public authorities? Very important point, I believe, especially in tort, given that a claim for the violation of European Court of Human Rights could now be brought against a public authority under Section 7 of that Act. Now, the settled law in this area remains remarkably unsettled, frankly, because, alas, we will continue to await threatened reforms shortly, but we have the benefit, meanwhile, of Professor Wright's timely and opportune moment, while she takes stock of modern tort law and human rights as changes mooted but unimplemented. And I have to say, as I said earlier, I do not expect any immediate changes. The book has been updated. I know that they want them, but they won't be there. But the book has been updated to reflect developments to date, and I'm saying that takes us really into 2017 and up to the general election. And as the author says, whether it is appropriate to attribute particular goals and functions to tort law is highly contested, and the analysis begins by locating the discussion within these contemporary debates, and Wright specifically reviews the extent to which the action against public authorities under Section 7 of the Act has impacted on the development of common law principles, as well as this issue of the horizontal effect of the Act between non-state actors. And I think that's a very important, very modern approach that she's adopted here. Now, for this new edition, 2 new chapters have come in. There's one on a human rights-based approach to tort law, which is chapter 2, and then there's addition to that, there's the public authority liability and privacy from misuse of private information to autonomy, which is now chapter 8, and they're included. But reading the work makes us realise it's clearly a matter of work in progress, frankly, so we can look forward to a new edition, I think, once the party political bickering finishes and the landscape settles a bit in the summer of 2017. But as usual, don't expect anything too soon. And as I say, finally, the law is stated as at the 1st of June 2016, and the book's available as a book, a PDF and an e-book. It is a hardback, this one. I always like the nice little logo there. Hart Studies in Private Law. It's Hart produce really good books, and I'm so glad that Bloomsbury is still continuing. Now they've taken them over, they're still continuing. This is Article 5, Right to Liberty and Security. You're looking at it there. You see again, you've got the footnoting there at the bottom. A lot of detail. It's actually not a difficult book to read at all. And again, you probably remember this case, Osman. Well known. And a lot of information, that's on page 139, a lot of information, the backlash against Osman, set out there very clearly. Many of you will be aware of that. Of course, Article 6 is a bone of contention with some and extremely useful to others, but that is where we are. Anyway, can I thank Jane Wright very much indeed for producing the new edition. I'm sure there will be another one in due course. In the meantime, a great thank you to Bloomsbury and Hart for continuing to publish this work. Thank you. Bye-bye.